The race did not begin until 5:30 p.m. The idea was to avoid running in the midday sun, but instead they set out at the hottest time of the day with temperatures nearing triple digits. As was common in those days, there were only two water stations for the entire 26.2-mile course. 71 men were entered into the race. 13 of them chose not to even begin in such harsh conditions. Another 28 collapsed along the course and were unable to finish. And only 30 runners were eventually able to make it across the finish line. No time records were set, and the fight to the finish became a battle for survival. Today is Sunday, July 13th, 2025, and on this day in 1924, the marathon at the Paris Olympics produced the highest number of DNFs in Olympic marathon history. First, we'll talk about the race conditions on that hot summer day in France. Then we'll discuss how the marathon itself played out, and finally, we'll hear how this unbelievable dropout rate has affected safety conditions in the world of road racing in the century since. I'm your host, Running Up That Hillary, and you are listening to Today in Running History. Today's episode, and all of the others for that matter, was made possible thanks to Rob on the Run Productions. My good friend Rob Garcia, who many of y'all probably know by his own podcast, Rob on the Run, is the technical wizard behind Today in Running History. All of the visuals y'all see on the YouTube version of my podcast, plus the intro and outro music, and everyone's favorite blooper reels are all thanks to Rob. And actually, sharing the bloopers at all was Rob's idea in the first place, since I give him so much material to use for them. If any of y'all are looking to get into the world of podcasting or YouTubing and need some help on the production side, I cannot recommend Rob's services highly enough. You can reach out to him by emailing robontheRunpodcast@gmail.com, which I will also include in the description of this episode. All right, let's talk about the 1924 Olympic Marathon. The marathon has been a part of every modern Olympic Games since the very first one in Athens, 1896. During the first few iterations of the games, the marathon was some random distance close to 40 kilometers, depending on wherever the finishing stadium was and wherever they felt like putting the starting line. At the 1908 Olympics in London, the distance was standardized to the modern 26.2 miles. In 1924, 71 men from 22 different nations were entered into the marathon. This was the seventh time that the U.S. produced runners for this event, the only country to have had marathoners in every Olympics at that point. It was also the first time that Ecuador, Spain, and Czechoslovakia each entered a competitor into the Olympic marathon. The previous day, 38 men from 10 nations had suffered through a grueling 10,650-meter cross-country race. Temperatures that day reached well over 100 degrees, and only 15 of those 38 men finished the race. That race had begun at 3:30 p.m. for some reason, and since it had produced such disastrous results, Olympic officials decided not to start the marathon the next day at the same time. The logical thing would have been to have the marathon start in the morning, but instead they chose to push it out 2 hours and have them begin at 5:30 p.m. when it was still well above 90 degrees. Due to these conditions, 13 men chose not to begin the race at all, including the only athletes representing the countries of Austria and Norway. This left 58 athletes from 20 countries. The gun went off and the suffering began. The course was an out and back that started and ended at the main Olympic Stadium. A Greek runner named Alexandros Kranis took an early lead but ended up dropping out near the turnaround when he was overtaken by Frenchman Georges Verger. Verger himself dropped out as well, and Albin Stenroos from Finland surged past him to take the lead. The lone aid station was set up at the 20K mark, so runners could stop for water around 20 kilometers, run to 21 kilometers, turn around, and then get water again at 22K, then suffer thirstily for the final 20 kilometers. Now let's talk about what aid stations looked like during marathons in the 1920s. Water, of course, was the main draw, but instead of individual cups like they have today, they had these communal buckets where runners would use their hands to douse themselves and attempt to get some water into their mouths. These days, in addition to water, aid stations at marathons and elite runners' personal bottles will almost always include some sort of high-carb sports drink. They did the same at the 1924 Olympic Marathon, but instead of disposable cups filled with Gatorade, they instead offered large glasses of red wine. Another challenge that runners of the 1924 Olympic Marathon faced was that the course was open to both pedestrians and automobiles. Film footage of this race shows cars making their way right next to the athletes, and it reportedly dredged up a lot of extra dust, making it harder for the runners to breathe. Spectator control was also an issue, and there were not any barricades to keep random people from wandering out onto the course. Halfway through the race, many of the 58 starters had already dropped out, and they continued to do so one by one. The Finnish man, Albin Stenros, who took the lead at the halfway point, was able to keep it for the entire second half of the race, winning gold a full 6 minutes ahead of the man in second place with a time of 2:41:22. Second place was an Italian named Romeo Bertini, and third was American Clarence DeMar. DeMar, known as Mr. DeMarathon, is notorious for winning the Boston Marathon 7 times, including the 1924 edition of the race just 3 months before winning Olympic bronze. I will do an entire episode devoted to Clarence DeMar at some point because he is pretty fascinating. He actually won his first Boston Marathon at the age of 22 in 1911, and then his final in 1930 at the age of 41, which is a pretty amazing spread if you think about it. In all, 30 men made it to the finish line of the 1924 Olympic Marathon, with the final runner, Elmar Ryman of Estonia, doing so nearly a full hour after the winner in a time of 3:40:52. To this day, Ryman's finish is the slowest official men's Olympic marathon time in history. The horrifying conditions of this race that led to a dropout rate of nearly 50% is cited as a major catalyst in improving road racing conditions and runner safety in extreme weather during future races. The 1928 Olympic Marathon in Amsterdam was run on a course closed to all automobiles and featuring water stations every 10 kilometers. This led to a much more reasonable dropout rate of 17%, as well as winning times nearly 10 minutes faster than the 1924 edition. When the Olympics returned to Paris last summer, there were aid stations every 5 kilometers, and the DNF rate lessened to about 12%. The men's race was won in a new Olympic record time of 2:06:26, more than half an hour faster than Albin Stenros's win there a century before. And that is all I have for y'all today. Thank you so much for continuing to tune in. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, tag me in your stories, rate the show 5 stars, and then join me again tomorrow as we hear about the man stripped of his Olympic medals in 1912 who had them posthumously reinstated a full 110 years later. I'm your host, Running Up That Hillary, and this has been Today in Running History. Intro music goes here, here's where it goes. The previous day, 38 men from 10 nations. God, my nose is itchy. I need to restart that because I'm like, this happens like every time, and it's just like, I don't even know what people do when they're like live broadcasters. I guess they have broadcast careers. That helps too. More than half an hour faster than Albin Stenros's win there a century before. Oh, that was rough. I'm going to re-say that whole sentence and scratch my nose again because that apparently is my thing. When the Olympics returned to Paris last summer, here's the outro. outro music goes here.